Yeah, sorry about that.
Good evening. I'm Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. As many of you know, Harlem Network News is a media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and we are still here. We consider ourselves a very viable organization here in the Harlem community and the communities of the world. We are an essential service, and we are dedicated to assuring that Harlem and the Harlems of the world are informed, engaged, and called to action. And tonight, this is all about Harlem, as we look at Juneteenth and all the festivities that are happening, the significance of Juneteenth being a national holiday. But aside from that, it's very, very, very front and center and befitting that we are in the middle of early voting for the primaries. And we have some very key races that really impact Harlem and Central Harlem. We have a congressional race against an incumbent who's been in for a while, and there's been debates and information, making sure that people know exactly what is going on. But tonight, we are tuning in to our state assembly race, which is also a very intense race that is going to determine a lot of the future of Harlem. So this is very, very important. We need people to get out. We need people to vote, but we need people to understand who these candidates are and how it will impact their lives. We're not doing a debate. We are just asking questions of each candidate separately, given the short time that we have. We think that it'll be more viable for people to just get straight information and really understand who these candidates are. And a lot of times, mainstream media doesn't cover what goes on up here. How they say there's a food desert. Well, there's a media desert going on up here, and Harlem Network News is in the building. Okay. So I have with us a candidate for state assembly. We're the 70th district, and that is in the person of Conrad Blackburn. And I'm going to have Conrad, please introduce yourself and just tell us who you are, whose you are, and a little bit about your background. That's our first question, and then we'll kind of move on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Conrad Blackburn. I'm a candidate for State Assembly for Assembly District 70, which covers Central and West Harlem. By day, I'm a public defender. I do criminal defense. I also practice as an immigration attorney doing deportation defense during the first Trump administration. And I also do policy work at the same time as carrying a caseload as a public defender. I do a lot of work in the criminal justice reform spaces. I've helped write the city anti-solitary confinement law. I've helped work on and write some of our sentencing reform bills and a lot of criminal justice reform bills in Albany. Um, I am running for office here because I believe that power should be returned back to the people of Harlem. I'm someone who fancies myself as trying to follow in the footsteps of our great political leaders of the past, like Malcolm X and Fred Hampton and Ella Baker and A. Philip Randolph. And all of them talked about making sure that power was ground up and power came from the people. And that's exactly what I want to do is return that power back to the people of Harlem. Growing up, I wasn't born in Harlem originally, just like so many of our greats. I was born in Florida. I lived in a single parent household. My mom was a single parent. She was an immigrant herself, and so I struggled a lot growing up. I grew up in poor in the projects. I was the victim of police brutality. I was arrested wrongfully multiple times in my life. I've had family members die due to gun violence, and oftentimes we lived with food insecurity, and housing insecurity. We didn't have lights sometimes, and so that struggle, really going through that struggle, molded me, and it lit a passion inside of me to fight for a world where children don't have to grow up the way I did. And so I have been seeking that fight out my entire life. I did student organizing with Students for a Democratic Society when I was in undergrad. I then went to law school, learned what being a public defender was, became a public defender, and that's what I've done for my entire career. And I didn't stop organizing there. In my second year of office, or my second year in my office, me and two to three of my friends unionized my workspace. And so we created a shop, a wall-to-wall shop of about 400 people. And I've been on the executive board of my union ever since. And so I'm someone who's deeply committed to the passion of building a better life for people.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we're just filling in the gaps. This is not your resume, but where did you go to school and how did all that happen? Because I always like for people to understand. I mean, we're talking about you as a candidate, but it's
Hmm.
important for young people to understand how someone can break that glass. Yeah,
Yeah.
that glass
So
ceiling. Mhm.
yeah, thank you so much. I went to undergraduate at University of South Florida. I studied political science and philosophy. I had a dual major. And then I went to law school at the George Washington Law School in Washington, D.C. Um, the way I broke that glass through that ceiling is with community. Right? Nobody does anything on their own. All right. Everybody has had some amount of help to get where they're at. And that is the same for me. When I was in high school, my middle and high school years, I was kind of going down the wrong,
Uh-oh. I think our Conrad Blackburn froze a little
hanging
bit.
out with the wrong people.
Okay, great.
And my mom saw that. She wanted me, we back? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my middle and high school years, I was going down the wrong path. My mom cared about me a lot and tried to do her best to keep me off of the streets, so to speak. And so oftentimes she would send me to my friend's house to stay over, do homework, to get me out of the community and the circumstances I was in. But then I would go to school and, I would do really well on my tests, finish my tests really fast and get an A on everything. And my teachers all were like, the Conrad I see on tests and the Conrad I see in class are two different people. How
Mm,
do we fix
okay.
this? And so my teachers really challenged me to do better. And, a community of people taught me what college was and how college would benefit me and how, I'd be able to try and make a successful life for myself by going to college. And so, multiple people showed me the way there. And then my professors in undergrad told me that I should go to law school. And so I kind of just followed the
Okay.
advice of people around me.
Okay. And just one quick question. Uh, I read, and we don't know if everything we read is correct, but
Hmm.
that you did some study in London. Is this true? Or
Yeah, I
all
studied abroad
right.
in London in law school. I did a international human rights program in Oxford
Mm.
in law school where we learned about international criminal law.
Okay, okay, great. So now we're going to dive into some questions that actually have to do with being a state assembly person. Maybe we should start with what does a state assembly person do? Because as we do on news, I want to assume that nobody knows anything. And
Hmm.
even those that think they know don't really know. So this is Harlem Network News, and we're talking to candidate for state assembly, and that is in the person of Conrad Blackburn. So what does a state assembly person do, and what can a state assembly person do? Because there are a lot of things that people think, oh, the mayor could do this, or the governor could do that, or the congressperson can do that, and that's not in the perimeter of what their specific job, though all of these political pathways do cross. But what does a state assembly person do or can?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. A lot of us don't really know what they do. To explain what a state assembly member does, I just want to kind of make a parallel with the federal government. So people know with our federal government, we have three branches. We have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The legislative branch is Congress, right? You have the House of Representatives and you have the Senate. In New York, the government is structured the exact same way. You have the executive, you have the legislative, and then you have the judicial. And so a state assembly person is a member of the legislative branch of the government. You can think of state assembly kind of like you think of federal Congress, the House of Representatives, right? So we are the lower house. We are lower than the Senate. And what a state assembly member does is they write and pass laws that affect the entire state. They control the state budget, which in New York is about $250 billion, which is more than most countries in the world.
Wow. Mm.
And they have a constituent services office where they are meant to help their community members out, connect them to resources that they need to be connected to, and fight fights with their community that they need to fight. And so those are typically the three things a state assembly member does in terms of their job description. But what a state assembly member can do is boundless, right? If the right person is in office and a creative person is in office, they don't stop at just passing laws, right?
Mm.
What they do is organize with their community to help bring power and build power for their community members. And so your constituent services office doesn't have to be just connecting people to services. Your constituent services office can be making sure that you are out in the district, catching problems for people where they arise, meeting people where they're at, and showing people where to fight, what levers to push, but also using your influence to influence city policy, to influence federal policy, right? Trying to raise your profile enough to make sure that you have enough of a vision and enough of a presence to really bring the fight and concerns of your community up to those different levels and branches of government. And so you can be an organizer while you're in office and not just be legislating. And that's what I would plan to do if I was a state assembly member.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Great answer. We're going to move on. Excuse me. What are the parameters of State Assembly District 70? Where is it? Where are the boundaries? Who are the people? Who are the people in there? Thank you.
Yeah,
I,
great question. Yeah, sorry, my cat is probably going to interrupt us a couple
uh,
times, but
thank you.
Assembly District 70 is mostly central and West Harlem. So the district starts at 110th Street, right above the park.
Mm.
The district has been cut very weirdly in the past few years. And so everything down there west of Morningside Park and south of 125th Street is cut out of District 70. So below 125th, west of Morningside Park is not going to be in the district. But as soon as you get east of Morningside Park, you're in the district. And so you keep going up, up, up. When you get to 125th Street, everything going to the west to Riverside is in the district. And on
Mm.
the west side, you go up to about 142nd Street, cut over. There are some parts where 145th is in the district, but you cut back down. And on the east side, the easternmost boundary is Fifth Avenue. Marcus Garvey Park is cut out of the district intentionally. And so,
Okay. Whoa.
yes.
Okay. Okay, so this redistricting thing and what the cuts are is impactful even in our
Yes.
District 70. Um, who are the people in our neighborhood? I'm gonna ask that question like a Sesame Street question. Who are the people in our neighborhood? Because I know that there is a lot of what people are saying is gentrification, that a
Mhm.
certain percentage of Blacks have had to leave Harlem
Mhm.
because they couldn't afford it. So
Yep.
right now, in terms of the percentages, as you know them, who are the people in our neighborhood?
Yeah, Harlem is the Mecca of Black America. When you think of Harlem, you think of Black America. But these days, 11% of Black families have been pushed out in the past 10 years, and 15% of white families have been brought in. So Harlem is now only 44% Black, and it might be a little bit less as we're speaking right now. The next closest group is our Latin population, and
Okay,
they're above about 30%, 30, maybe they're around 35%. And then
okay,
you have the white population, which is around 30%. And then you have some small percentages of an Asian population, East Asian, which is growing.
Yes.
Uh, and then, the category other is very small too.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So that gives a good, like, kind of bird's eye view of what is going on here. What do the economics look like in District 70? Because that's
Yeah,
a whole nother like
it
pattern.
is.
It's a whole nother pattern. And even, when start getting into the races of the world, there's a lot of crossing over and, who is this and who's, so, but what do the economics look like? Because that's a very critical thing. Thank you.
Ye- Yeah, I mean that is something critical to point out, right? Because Harlem has a poverty rate of 28.6%, which is 10% higher than the citywide poverty rate of 18.6%. In Harlem, white families make 15 times that of black families when we're talking about median income. And so black families in Harlem median income, I believe, is around 30 to $50,000, if I'm correct, or somewhere within that range. Whereas white households median income is $120,000 plus. And so there are some real deep economic disparities in this district, and it's only widening because families who make less than $50,000 are being pushed out at astronomical rates, whereas families who make between 100 and $200,000 are being brought in at astronomical rates. And so what we're seeing is an intentional displacement of poorer Harlemites, and unfortunately, because race and class is tied together so deeply in America, what we're seeing is an intentional displacement of poor black families and an intentional bringing in of richer white households.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, you answered the question. Okay, so we've gotten a picture of what District 70 looks like economically, in terms of race, and in terms of where. So we're getting a good picture of what District 70 looks like. Now, Conrad, we're going to come back to you and what motivated you? No, no, no. I'm gonna stop right there. You said that your family were immigrants. Can you expound on that, please? Thank you.
Yes, I am, and people always disagree on whether
Okay.
this is a real term or not. I say I'm a first generation American, meaning I was born in America and my parents were not. My father was never in my life, but what I know about my father is he was born in Jamaica, just like my mom was born in
Okay.
Jamaica, and
Okay.
my mom came over when she was about 14 years old.
Okay. 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 Thank you for that. It's important, especially in these days when everybody's trying to do ancestry.com or
Uh-huh.
all these things to really see, where we're all coming from, where we all interact and where we diverge. And it's very interesting because we know that there is a large I guess you could say Caribbean, or quote,
Yeah.
people used to say West Indian,
Mhm.
what is that? In Brooklyn, but we know that it really all started right here in Harlem.
Yeah.
If you go back, it started right here in Harlem. So that's very interesting. So moving along, Conrad, what actually motivated you to run as an assembly person? Where did that come from? Was it out of your own passion, or I was doing some reading, like some people really encouraged you to do that? How did that
Mhm.
all happen? Please share that with us.
Yeah, kind of like I said in the beginning, I've always been looking for that way to build a better life for people, especially people who grew up like me. Um, I went to law school and became a public defender because I thought that that was the best way to try and build a better life for people who grew up like me, to be a lawyer for poor people like me. What I see every day in these courtrooms is devastating, and what I see is my job as a public defender is mostly to stop people from going to prison for a very long time. And so that's just putting a band-aid on the problem. I'm
Mm,
helping people individually through some of the worst parts of their life, but I'm not changing their lives, so to speak. And so that's why I started doing policy work because I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll help try to write the laws and that'll help change people's lives.
mhm.
And then what I saw very quickly is that our elected officials, they're beholden to corporate interests because a lot of times corporate interests are what fund their campaigns, and these corporate interests expect them to deliver for them and not for the people. And so we can't get positive laws passed in New York for that very reason. And so I hit a block there. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try to build a better life for my coworkers. So that's why I unionized my office, a wall-to-wall shop of 400 people. And, I think what was being seen was my efforts to lead in so many different spaces. And so my union approached me, UAW, that's my union, the Association of Legal Advocates and Attorneys.
Okay.
Um, they approached me and they asked me, hey, did you ever, have you ever considered running for office? You seem to be involved in politics in your shop, would you be interested in running for office uptown? Because we've identified seats where there are not pro-labor people in these seats, and we need pro-labor advocates and people who are going to fight for the working class. And initially, I said no because I hated politicians. I liked
Hmm.
political theory, hated politicians because everything I've seen growing up is that people just pay lip service and don't really do anything for the community when they get in office. And
Hmm.
so initially, I was like, no, politics isn't my thing. People don't, I'm from the project, I'm from the hood. People don't listen to things we have to say. People think they're better than us. No one's going to listen to me. I'm not rich. I don't have these connections. And, my union just kept pressing me, and they were like, "That's exactly the type of person that should run for office. You should give this some thought." And I tried to give them the shoulder. I was like, "Yeah, talk to me later." But they kept circling back and circling back. And so eventually, they contacted me. They said, "Will you do this?" And I said, "I can give it some thought." And so they said, "Okay, have some conversations with people. Are you open to running openly as a socialist?" And I said, "Yes, I've been a socialist my whole life, just like my heroes, Malcolm X and Fred Hampton and the Panthers." And so, eventually I was convinced that because of Mayor Mamdani's momentous win here in Harlem, which was pretty heavy despite the incumbent endorsing Cuomo, um, I should run in this district because this district was already to the left of our leaders. And I got convinced that this was the right time to build power for people and really try to stop this bleeding and displacement that's in Harlem. And so I answered that call as the eventual next step to try and build power for people here in Harlem and change people's lives.
Okay. When did you jump in the race?
December, I launched my hard launch for the campaign was very early December, somewhere around like December 9th or something like that.
Okay. 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 Now you are on the ticket as what?
I'm running in the Democratic primary. I also have the Working Family Party's endorsement, so I'm on
Okay.
the Working Family Party line as well.
Okay. So you're running as a Democrat or because there's people are confused. We know and the lines, are like that. But,
Yeah.
are you like part of the Democratic Socialist Party
Yeah.
or okay.
And so the thing
So
is,
what is that?
it's nebulous. It's weird. Like people don't really understand it. So the Democratic Socialist is not a party in itself. It's more like a political club, right? And so Democratic Socialists are Democrats. They're just on the socialist end of the spectrum. So they're on the left. They're left of moderate Democrats or corporate Democrats or what you think of as normal Democrats today. But they're
Oh,
still part of the Democratic Party. It's not a separate party in and of itself. It's just a very, very big political club, so to speak.
okay. 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 It's kind of the first I've heard it said that way, but thank you for the clarification. Because as some people hear that Democratic Socialists, the way it's said, particularly to a lot of where your district is,
Hmm.
that's kind of a frightening sound.
Yeah.
People don't really know what that is. And being on the working party too, which a lot of people are, they don't understand what that is, so it's a very concerning thing. And also, a lot of the people in the district, as we have spoken about the Black Brown world in District 70, a lot of people are feeling like the people in the Democratic Socialist Party are like mostly white, mostly middle to upper income, those kinds of people. So they're kind of feeling maybe like these people are coming to take our community in another way or push us out in another way. What can you say to that? Because that's a real
Mhm.
factor. And I do want to say, just for the record, that our questions are coming from community people. I'm not naming
Yeah,
names who send them in, but these are real questions. So you're gonna get hard questions because
it's okay.
people
That's
in
what I'm
Harlem,
here for.
people in
I
Harlem,
love
we're
it.
not playing. People in
That's
Harlem.
what I'm here for,
Okay,
right?
so
Yeah.
address that question.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that in two different ways, right? The
Okay.
the first way is I didn't join Democratic Socialists for a long time being in New York because I had the same fears. I've always been a socialist, so I knew what Democratic Socialist was.
Mhm.
But I had an idea of it as being, white wealthy people who don't really care about Black liberation and Black issues.
Right.
It wasn't until, I was asked to run for office by my union and then was approached by DSA as well that I learned really to look behind the curtain and see what was going on. And, it's true in the past, DSA was very white. But then as, my generation came up, a lot more younger Black people started getting involved. And there's a whole Black socialist movement inside Democratic Socialists. We call it Afro Soc, with a lot of very passionate young Black socialists who are, like the Panthers, who are dedicated to ensuring that DSA is really fighting for Black liberation. And if you look at the elected officials who are Democratic Socialists, most
Mhm.
of them are Black and most of them are people of color, right?
Mhm.
Like Jabari Brisport and Marcela Montañez and Claire Valdez and Chiose, Shahana Street, Sarah Hanna, most of the elected officials are Black. And so that's because there is a dedicated movement inside of DSA now to really uplift um, Black voices and bring Black liberation to our districts. So that's one part of the answer to it.
Okay. Okay.
DSA does have a lot of Black people inside of DSA, and we're actively trying to recruit more Black people. It's hard for people to care about politics when most of their life is trying to figure out how they're going to get their next meal. Uh,
Right. Right.
and in terms of
Not to interrupt you, but that's what I
yeah,
was going to say. Like, of the DSA, the Black DSA, what does the economics look like? What does the education look like? Because sometimes that can be like a dividing line. And for some of the people in the district, as you said, what the numbers are, like, it's like, okay, these people don't understand what we're dealing with.
yeah. I mean, a lot of the Black elected officials came from working class backgrounds. A lot of them came from immigrant backgrounds, like Ferris Houffant Forrest.
Mhm.
And I myself grew up in the projects, right? So I would say I understand the issues a lot more than the incumbent who has grown up, middle class, wealthy most of his life. Sorry, my Alexa is gonna go off. Alexa
Right.
off. Um,
Okay.
so the other way I was going to answer that question is, I wanted to address the fears of DSA coming in and trying to displace people.
Mhm.
I that one I don't understand because the displacement has been happening already. And
Right.
there have been people who have been in power while the displacement was happening. And that's where the real fear should be pointed, is why in the past 10 to 20 years have 11% of Black families been pushed out,
Mhm.
and why are only affluent people being brought in?
Mhm.
Alexa off.
To yell at him sometimes. Okay. Okay. It's okay. Thank you. Okay. So we are getting a good sense of, what that is. And we're just, addressing this in a real way. Now, next we're going to get to I guess what I would say are political political questions. And I'm going to move to those. Just give a minute. This is Harlem Network News, and I'm Terri Wisdom. I'm here with the candidate for our state assembly, and that is in the person of Conrad Blackburn. Okay. All right. So this is just straight off the top, and I'm going to read them in order the way the constituents, the voters are asking these questions. And it may be a little teeny bit redundant, but we're going to see. It says, how do you plan to address the issues facing the Black community in Central Harlem, such as affordable housing and police brutality, gun violence, drugs, and marijuana sale.
Okay. Big one, because there's a lot of different issues within
Oh,
that
yeah.
one question.
Hmm.
I'll start with housing first. I actually say what our three platform planks are because it does encompass all of that. So, what our campaign wants to do is put tenants over landlords, people over profits, and communities over cages. And so, what tenants over landlord means is making sure that we do address the housing affordability crisis in Harlem. And we want to really focus and key in on our Black families and our working class poor families. And what people need to know is our district is 85% renters. We don't own much in our district. Our
Mm-hmm.
landlords have way too much power over us.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
so that's
Yes.
why it's so easy to
Like
push them.
raising the rent
Yeah.
whatever percent every year.
Hmm. Hmm.
What can you do? Yeah.
Exactly. And so the way we fight back is one, ensuring that we have more tenant protections, right? There are bills that I would sign on to right now that would make it easier for us to form tenant organizations and tenant unions and find money to give to those tenant organizations to really take a fight to their landlords to stop what is going on here, to stop these illegal rent raises, to stop these illegal pushouts, to stop these deed thefts, right? That's one. Two, we need to give people real pathways to ownership, right? Because that's how we start to build wealth for our Black families, is making sure that we have more ownership. And the way to do that is cooperative housing, in my opinion, because that's the only way we're going to be able to have enough capital to buy, is to go into the market alongside the state government, right? To co-own with the state government. So that way we have ownership in a property and we can pass that down. And there are multiple ways we want to do this, but we want to key in on community acquisition funds and community land trusts. Because what community acquisition funds do is they allow us to pool money in the community and give to tenants to buy buildings back from their landlords or buy blocks back from their landlords. And we want to put our property into a community land trust, which is just like a bank account for property. When it's in the land trust, the community owns it. We get to vote on what happens. And so that way, these big international developers can't come in, knock our buildings down, and build these high rises that we can't afford. But what that means is getting real estate and landlord money out of our politics. Our elected officials right now take money from the real estate lobby. They take money from landlords. They take money from corporate interests. And so they profit off of when your rent's raised. They profit off of you being kicked out of your building because that's when these big international developers can come in and build these buildings we can't afford. And so we have to get that money out of politics and give people pathways to ownership. And we have to put eviction or moratoriums on evictions for our people who live in NYCHA. We have to put moratoriums on evictions for people during the winter. We have to put moratoriums on evictions for our elderly so that, these landlords can't come in and force our elderly out of their homes. And we need to put moratoriums on evictions for people who are dealing with a landlord who won't make repairs when they need to, or dealing with landlords that they're in the middle of a case or in the middle of a court case on. That one's called the Clean Hands Act, which I would sign on to on day one. And so we need to bring real tenant protections to people here. Now, that's not the only affordability issue. Something that doesn't get talked about enough is Con Ed and how expensive Con Ed is, right? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, my campaign wants to publicize Con Ed. Right now, Con Ed is some weird public-private entity where the board of people that sit and make decisions on Con Ed work for Con Ed. So they profit off of raising our Con Ed rates. So we need to either get a real public alternative to Con Ed or make Con Ed public so that it answers to us, the people, because we know we're not going to vote to raise the rates on ourselves. And while we get there, we have to freeze our Con Ed rate where it's at right now so it can't rise again. So that way people aren't crushed by their Con Ed bills as well.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely. And, with the salaries that people are dealing with in our community, they're
mhm,
having to make choice between rent,
mhm,
food,
yes,
medicine. Medicare is not free
yep,
because if people are above a certain income, they're paying like $230 a month for Medicare,
yep,
and they might not even be using it. And there's no dental and eye care. So, there's a lot to be said. But when you're speaking about the housing, what about the AMI? Because there's all this
um,
conversation about
yeah,
affordable housing. And AMI, to my understanding, is not representative of this community. If this community's income is zero, to $65,000, stretching it, but the
Mhm.
AMI for affordable housing is 120,000, then that is basically helping those, and we have to talk race because it's real, those whites that are coming into the community or will come in, not that there's not some blacks that are making that 120, but it's not as many because you were like, oh, the whites are making 15 times more, which is, we'll talk about reparations later. But
Mhm.
this is what we're dealing with. And the AMI includes like people in like New Rochelle or something. And then when
Yes.
you speak about the AMI, everybody says, oh, yeah, that's what the AMI is. And it comes from the federal government. Like, what can we do about this? Because we basically locked up.
Yeah. So yeah, you're 100% right. AMI or area median income is used to really set what rent prices should be. It is a very flawed system for the very reason that you pointed out. You know, the median incomes that are derived for Manhattan for us, incomes come from New Rochelle, from Westchester. They lump that all in with us, which is unfair because we know our community does not make as much as those communities. And so that is not a fair representation of what the area median income should be for Harlem. It's a flawed system that we should not use anymore. I think things like that, your rent prices should be directly tied to your income, right? Especially for low income housing. Should not be AMI set. It should be tied directly to our income. And that's how we should be setting the standard in terms of like when we build and who gets a tax
Okay.
credit and for what.
So
And Mhm.
to interrupt you, just because it's a lot of information coming through, and I want to make
Yeah.
sure we pause and
Hmm.
get it. But what with the AMI, I mean, is that out of, because you're running for state assembly, and I know you spoke about, cross-pollination with all the branches of government. But what
Hmm.
in a state assembly can you do to push back on this AMI? Because everybody is tired of hearing the answer, oh, it's AMI, there's nothing we could do about it. It's the federal government. People are tired of that.
Yeah, as they should be. And that's not an answer that people should be giving people, right? You have to fight on something like this. Whether you feel like you have the power or not, you have to fight. And so one thing I said earlier is then use your voice and your profile as a state assembly member to really bring the fight to your federal counterparts then. Tell your federal counterparts exactly how the AMI is devastating us. Call a hearing in Albany so that you bring people up and have the people on the record talk about how AMI is affecting them, and then use that report and give it to the federal government so they can see how much it's crushing us. But the other way to fight back right now is to change the way that we do tax credits for these buildings, right? The 421A tax credit, and the 485, the new 485X tax credit. Right now, people have the
What are
option.
those? People don't know what that is.
Yeah, sorry. That's gonna very get that's gonna
Don't
get
know
very
what that
into
is.
the weeds. But really, what it is it's a tax credit for buildings if they build buildings in a certain amount of units, and they want let's say a 35-year tax credit, then they have to meet a minimum number of affordable housing units that they reserve for the community. In most cases, to get the biggest credit, it's 30% of your units have to be affordable. The
Mhm.
question is, what is
What
affordable?
is affordable? There we
Right?
go.
And so these credits can be given to buildings if 30% of them are affordable, meaning like they can set it up to 130% AMI, which is way over the AMI that's already too high,
Mhm.
plus 30%. And so we need to rewrite the law so that's not an option for them because 130% AMI is not affordable. So we need to change the definition of what affordable is then. It should be less than 100% AMI. It should be 80% AMI and under. That's what affordable would be, right? Families who make $80,000 and under. Um,
Okay.
and that's
Okay.
not to say our middle class is not being crushed either, right? People who make $100,000 in New York are not
Yeah.
making anything. And
Right.
so we do need to look out for those families as well. But again, 130% AMI is way above that as well.
Right. And we're talking about the people in our district, which as a state
Mhm.
assembly person, your responsibility would be to address the needs of your district. We don't know what the district is on the Upper West Side and wherever,
Mhm.
but we know what it is here, and
Yeah,
we
for
know
us.
that this is killing people. You know,
Yes.
in many ways. In many ways, they having to run out. Food insecurity. They're stressed all the time because they don't know if they're going to be able to have a home. So there's a lot going on. I'm going to bring it home, and we're going to talk about the 145 project.
Oh yeah.
Your view on the 145 project, because that's a hot topic here in
Yes.
Harlem. I know there's a big march or something on the 25th with Defend Harlem.
Mhm. Yep.
So what are your
I've been
thoughts on
doing work
that?
with them.
Yeah, what are your thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
I've been doing a lot of organizing and work with Defend Harlem. I think the development should have never been sanctioned the way that it's sanctioned. I wish I would have been able to pick up the mantle of the fight that my friend Kristen Richardson Jordan took up in trying to stop that development from happening. Now the fight is if you're going to build this building, you need to reserve that 30% of units that I was talking about, you need to reserve those for people who make $65,000 and under. I think more units should be reserved for truly affordable housing, if you ask me. But at least 30% of that one tower should be for people $65,000 and under, and preference should be given to people who live in the community and are from Harlem. But I really think we need to make sure that our developers are building much more affordable housing, including the 145 project should be much more affordable than that. And like I said at the beginning, cooperative ownership is the gold standard for us. And so I would have pushed for it to be a cooperative ownership building that is reserved for traditional community members in Harlem who are low income, so to speak.
Okay, so we're going to move on. I mean, these topics are vast. We could be all
Here
night,
for forever.
but we've got to really, we've first got to identify them, and then we've got to get some solutions. The other question that the community member had was affordable housing. It was police, and when we say brutality, we know here in Harlem that there is stop and check at
Mhm.
every gate. There's probably more police here than
Mhm.
anywhere. When people they may be stopping people for registrations on their car. Now we got the buses, have a camera, and if anybody's even pulling over to the curb to park, they're getting a $250 ticket, which is all tied up together with this kind of harassment that is happening to the people. And when people don't have money, maybe their registration isn't paid or their
Mhm.
insurance isn't paid, and now it's a whole thing. Or their
Mhm.
car is now booted because, they could easily get 4 or 5 tickets, and you can't really fight those because it's a picture, and they don't even let you see a picture of the picture. So,
Right.
what do you think? About the whole police and the stop and check. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm a public defender. So I handle these cases. I've handled a lot of cases for people who were arrested for having an expired license or for driving without a license. And I personally am someone who believes in transformative justice instead of the way that we do criminal justice here. I call it the criminal punishment system because it's meant to punish us and not really meant to help build us up. I think we need to focus on building our community members up and investing in us, and fighting poverty instead of focusing on throwing people in the cage and locking them away for the rest of their life. As you just mentioned, all of these little minor things that happen to us could eventually balloon into something where now our life is messed up because we got arrested for it. Now we can't get a
Right,
job. Now we
right.
can't get loans. Now we can't get a house. And how do people expect us to progress as a people if that's something that's happening to us? We can't. And so that's not how we should do criminal justice. Um, and what I will say is, yeah, stop and frisk, one of the most insidious things that could ever have been done to us, right? Because police officers just throw our kids up against a wall, dig their hands into their pockets. I've had cases where clients say the police officers put their hands inside of people's pants and touch them inappropriately.
Wow,
We
wow.
need to protect our community members from police officers who go rogue and police officers who feel like they're above the system and can't be checked. right?
Mm.
We really have to make sure that the police officers on the street are really there and dedicated to the job of keeping us safe and us having community safety. And there are some numbers that would be devastating to people if they knew. Every year it costs $500,000 to keep one person in Rikers. One person, $500,000 every year.
Okay. More
And
more than it costs to put them in college, for
exactly,
sure. That's
prison
for sure.
$300,000 per
Yeah,
person.
that's for sure. So, okay, quick. Drugs, marijuana sales, legal and illegal here in Harlem. What are your thoughts on that? Because we just have legalized cannabis and we got the
Mhm.
depens. How do you think that's impactful to our District 70?
Yeah, I think people should go to a dispensary and buy marijuana if they're trying to buy marijuana. Marijuana was legalized for a reason. The law was meant to give reparations to our communities. And so, there are business owners who are black business owners, especially here in Harlem, who went through the process of getting a license to sell to people. And when we are buying illegally, we're taking business away from our own brothers and sisters. And so people should go to a dispensary and buy weed legally. But I also think that, again, weed is legal. I don't think the police should be harassing people for selling weed on the street because, again, that is just not a good reason to have somebody's life, go down the drain. And so we need to come at this compassionately.
Okay. And just outside thought, just in terms of the saturation in our community and all the things that people are dealing with. Obviously, money is going to be made from it. It is legal. That has, stopped a few things. But with all the issues we have in our community, do you have any thoughts just about it? And there's still a lot of illegal shops. So, probably more here than anyone. And we also have more of the I guess they're like drug centers where people come,
Hmm.
get some kind of rehabilitative drug to, and a lot of those people don't even live in our community. We have more of those drug places
Hmm.
in Harlem than anywhere. They're coming from over at Randall's Island, they're coming from Jersey. So what about that? Because District 70 is saturated with that.
Yeah, I mean,
What can we do?
yeah, it
What
just,
what is your
yeah.
view as
My
a
view of what
candidate?
we should do is building more supportive housing. And what supportive housing is it's real apartment buildings, individual apartments for people to live in. So, our street homeless population, which is usually our population of people who have substance abuse issues, they would
have,
have
that have become mental health issues.
yes, that have become mental health issues. They would have one, a dignified place to live, and there are live-in mental health professionals and doctors that live with them around the clock, 24/7. And so they would be connected to mental health services, be connected to medication. In some cases, family members can live with them if it's a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment.
Mm,
And these people would make sure that people are getting to their appointments, getting to their doctor's offices appointments on time, getting to their court date appointments on time, and making sure people live a healthy life. Because at the core of it, that's what people need is a pathway to live a dignified life. And supportive housing, it exists. We just need to fund it at a capacity
oh,
that we can get people off the streets and into them.
okay, so good answer. But does it have to be in Harlem? Because
No.
so
Yeah.
saturation here and other communities are not taking their fair
No.
share. And we
Yeah.
already have, a lot of situations here. So is
Yeah.
that
It
something
shouldn't.
that you would address?
Yeah, it shouldn't all be in Harlem. Why do they stuff all of these places in Harlem? Why is Harlem seen as the ground where they build all of these rehabilitation centers and supportive housing centers, right? We should disperse them throughout the city, right? We should put them in every community because a lot of these people who are street homeless are not from our community and are from different communities and probably would rather be closer to their family members in the communities where they're from. And so, yeah, it should be spread out and
Is
dispersed
that
evenly.
something that the state assembly that you could take on in the state assembly?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes,
so
this
I
is
just
something
want to
that's
make
squarely
sure
within.
it's, in your purview. Now, here's another kind of question from another community member. Can you explain your stance on campaign financing, particularly in regard to receiving funds from Israel government PAC? real estate owners. And, also they're saying, and where are your funds coming from, Conrad?
Yeah. My funds come from everyday working class people like you watching this and me. And I think that's the only place money should come from. I do not take any corporate money. I do not take super PAC money. I do not take money from APAC or Solidarity PAC or Israel. I do not take money from real estates. I do not take money from landlords, specifically because I want to be beholden to the people. I want to deliver for the people. If you are taking money from those sources, they expect you to deliver for them. And that's exactly what we've been seeing in Harlem, right? My opponent takes real estate money. My opponent takes landlord money. Today, Solidarity PAC, which is APAC, endorsed my opponent. And that information you can find on bit.ly slash APAC Jordan. He takes money from Israel. We should be not in the business of taking money from a genocidal government that is dropping bombs on people's living rooms, dropping bombs on children while they're going to school. We should not be invested in sending money over there. We should be investing our money in our own community and building our people up. And that's why I don't take money from outside sources because I want to be beholden to the people of Harlem. And so I take money from everyday working class people.
Okay, so you're not taking any money from the big PACs, from the APACs, and any.
Not at all. Never have, never will.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to move down these questions because we don't have too much more time. Um, okay. So they're saying what specific, it's a little redundant, but what specific steps will you take to ensure that the Black community's concerns are heard and addressed if you're elected, as the track record of elected officials is to take the vote of the Black community and then keep the distance from the voters and needs. And, as I stated, a lot of people, feel like Mondani needs to be more front and center here in Harlem. So there's just a concern about that. What are your thoughts about that? Do you see that as, real? How are you going to address that? Thank you.
Yeah, for me in particular, I believe that our power comes from each other, comes from the people. And so my office would be the people's office. And so I would hope to be in the community as much as I can, coming to people's doors, knocking door to door, meeting people where they're at, seeing what the issues are, making sure people can come see me at my office willingly without having to go through layers of security and set up 5 million different appointments in order to see me. I want people to come meet me where they're at. And I'll be outside a lot of the times. People could just come stop me on the street and talk to me about their problem. And I want to make sure that we can answer them within 24 to 48 hours. And so that's how I remain beholden to the people, is making sure that I'm out with the people, talking to the people, being of the people, and not, lording over them and thinking power is top down because power is bottom up. Um,
Mhm.
the only reason that we ever get put into these places is because the people put us there. And so it would behoove us to remind ourselves that that's how this works and not the other way around. And so, yeah, I also agree that, we need Mayor Mamdani to focus on issues here in Harlem, focus on issues in the Black community. A lot of what I used to say when I was organizing around Black Lives Matter was it's not about exclusion, it's about focus, right? Where is the most focus needed? It's right here. My whole goal has always been to protect, uplift, and build for the most vulnerable in our society. And the most vulnerable, I usually tell people, is Black trans women because they fight, every struggle at one time. But just extrapolating from that, it's the Black community. We are the most vulnerable community right now.
Yeah.
We need people to
Yes.
come and focus on our issues.
Yes, yes, because there's a lot of, and I wouldn't say it's a smokescreen because it's impactful to everybody, but
Yes.
there is a lot of conversation. It's like, is it fashionable? Immigrants, 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 ICE, 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 and that kind of can become a smokescreen in a way to the feelings of some of the people in your district because this district, with some of the Blacks that have been here, this Harlem has been built on their back. They were here before there was Whole Foods, before there was, decent supermarkets, before there was a lot of things. And they're feeling like they're not cared about. that nobody is trying to bring anything from them for them, and they've been here, and now there's a focus, which had to be because we are a sanction whatever, sanctuary, but there's that kind of thing. So it's not that they have something against immigrants, but they're like, we're here. What are we getting? What are we doing? And even in
Hmm.
terms of the whole immigration thing, when they were bringing people to the hotels in Roosevelt Hotel downtown, they were shipping the kids up to Harlem.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. Yeah.
this is a conversation and a
Yeah.
reality that people are living, but nothing is being done about it. So
Yeah.
this is, you gotta, anybody who's taking on this is taking on a lot if they're taking it on for real.
Yeah, that's a fact. And I mean, people need to start asking their elected officials why, right? We should stop shouting into the void and shout at the people that we need to be shouting at. And what I will say is, just this morning I was having a conversation with somebody in the community, and I told them all of these issues are connected. These issues don't exist in a vacuum. I think the immigrant issue is a black issue because look at Chicago. Look what ICE was doing in Chicago. They were
Yeah,
picking up
they're picking
children
up
who look just like
anybody.
me, you
And they're
know?
picking up anybody. And we know that. So I guess they're not, people aren't feeling like it's not their issue because they know they could get picked up. Black
Hmm.
and brown people look all kind of
Hmm. It's the
hues,
same police
so
system.
anybody
Yeah.
can be picked up. And by the time you're picked up and you prove, oh, I'm a citizen, you could have been in jail
They're
for
already
2 years
gone. Yeah.
or dead,
Yeah. Or
so,
like as you see with the Trump
or your
administration.
children gone
Yeah.
to you don't know where and you can't find.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, these are some key issues, but I'm, taking questions from our constituents here, and these are like some of their concerns, like raising the hand. Well, what about us?
Hmm.
What about the Harlems? And even in terms of, economic development, that's the next question. How do you, Conrad, plan to deal with economic development and job opportunities for residents in your district, particularly those who have been marginalized and underserved? And then also, the question talks about small businesses and fundings and all that kind of thing, which in other communities is normal,
Hmm.
not
So
normal here, though you
yeah.
have money in the bank. Yeah.
Yeah. So for small businesses in particular, we have a full platform for small businesses because we need to make sure our mom and pop shops can stay here in Harlem because a lot of those businesses are also what helped build Harlem into what it is and to the Harlem that we know as the Black Mecca of America. And so we're pushing a small business rent freeze so that small businesses can have their rent frozen just like tenants, so they don't have to worry about rising costs there. The Con Ed freeze would help them as well. We're pushing public banking for our small mom and pop shops so that they don't have to rely on these private banks that give them predatory loans and community land trusts, right? Because if we put our business again into a community land trust, then these big international businesses and developers can't come in here and price our small mom and pop shops out. And so we have a full small business plan. In terms of economic development for people who are not in small businesses, I'm pushing a $30 living wage by 2030. We have to make sure that people can afford to live. And right now, the wages that people make, they cannot afford to live. $16 an hour, $17 an hour is not a livable wage in New York State. So we need a $30 living wage. And then I'm pushing more partnerships with unions so that we can do apprenticeship programs for our kids, so that they don't have to go pay all the money that they need to go to a four-year university, right? They can get on the job training from a union, get a union job where they can make a very, very good living, and be set for the rest of their lives. Um, and I want to make sure that there's more public education. So like I want to make sure that we're hosting forums, town halls, hosting teach-ins, regularly in our office so that we can continue empowering people because, if you teach a man to fish, they can eat for the rest, or teach a person,
Yes,
they'll eat
thank
for the
you.
rest of their
And
life.
and also access, we're gonna go maybe about 10 more minutes, we're a little bit over,
Okay.
but access to capital. because
Yes.
those that may already have existing businesses, and in some instances, immigrants have been able to kind of pool their monies and
Yep.
push their businesses out. That's culture, tradition,
Yep.
whatever it is, it's good. But the people that are here that are, going, and mainly the Black small businesses who are going through the ranks and the traditions, going to this, SBA, or going to the empowerment zone, or going wherever,
Mhm.
and they're like just hitting the wall. And
Yep.
they're no shade, but there's organizations like Grameen America, which is a microloan situation for women, and they're in Bangladesh and they're here, and this is where some of the women are getting their small business money from. This is crazy. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And it's kind of a hard money loan, but it's the only way that they can get money to do these businesses. This is shameful. What do you say about that? What do you do about that, Conrad Blackburn?
Yeah, I think for a long time, our community has been fractured and separated, and we've been taught to be individuals instead of going back to our roots and making sure that we saw each other as a community and we helped each other out in community. One thing I loved about what the Panthers did was the free food program, the free breakfast program, where they pooled resources from all through their neighborhoods, put it together, and gave free food to people, free breakfast to children. We can have that sense of community again. And what I want to do is find ways to incentivize that community, find ways to incentivize us doing community pools and having the state subsidize it. And so I really have a vision of trying to create something where if a family or a friend group goes into business as a co-op, then the state funds them, gives them capital, some capital to get their feet off the ground, to get their business running. And that's to incentivize, again, this collective ownership of businesses and for us to come back together as a community again and look out for one another. And I think, that's how we can start to pool our resources and get funds from the state to really get our businesses going.
Okay. So District 70 is a really hot box.
Hmm.
I don't know, all of the innards of, some of the other districts, but this is a hot box in terms of what you're dealing with. And in terms of, we've had a lot of public officials come and say what they're going to do. And then by the time they get in, it's really not doable or possible. How do you climb that wall, Conrad?
Um, by fighting, by doing what I've done my whole life and just putting my head down, rolling my sleeves up and working. I'm someone who believes you know, you can get through many issues, by being dedicated to grinding through it and working and making sure that you listen to as many different voices as you can, bring in that advice from as many different people as you can, and just go about everything with an integrity and be a person of your word and keeping your word and making sure that you're never going back on that. And so the more you're doing that, the more you're just doing right by people, working hard and you know, listening and making sure you're taking advice from everywhere, the more you can climb through, or get through any struggle or hot box or any strife.
Now, one of the things, and I want to know if you're aware of this, uh, in your district, District 70, the majority of District 70 sits in District 5. District 5 education
Hmm.
district. And District 5 is 99.999% Black and Brown kids. There are hardly any white kids in the public schools and even in the charter schools in District 5. They don't exist. The only schools that really have more white kids is the school that's in the district office. I think it's Columbia Upper School. And that might be because of who lives in the neighborhood. I don't know if they have to test in, but they're getting a whole different education there.
Hmm.
So, what about that? Are you aware that that's the situation and that separate but not equal law was passed like 50 years ago, but right here in your district, that's not happening? And, it said, okay, just based on the dynamics of where people live and what it is, maybe you're not going to get that mixing unless you went back to the civil rights movement and you started busing people, it's not going to happen. But the fact that they're not having equal education, the fact that they're not, getting some of the extras, like some computers or some this or some that, because the principal is overwrought and can't write the grants or the parents aren't grant writers. So are you aware of this? And what about it?
Yeah, I've been hearing about this as I've been learning more about education policy, and I think it's a shame. But what it's emblematic of is the fact that we don't fund public schools at the rate that we need to fund public schools. And so I'm someone who's deeply committed to making sure our public schools are fully funded. We call it from cradle to CUNY. So fully funded from the time that a child is born. So universal health care is what I'm talking about, all the way through CUNY, because CUNY used to be free and it should be free again. And so I think the best way to go about that is taxing Columbia. Columbia is the biggest landlord in our district, but it's
Absolutely.
tax exempt right now. We need to change that tax exempt status, tax them, and invest that money back into our public schools.
Yeah.
We also have to stop the charterization of Harlem. There are too many charter schools being brought up in Harlem, and too much money is going to them at the expense of public schools. Don't get me wrong, charter schools can be a good thing if used properly, but we need to make sure we're not leaving the public schools behind for the very reason that you were talking about. We need to make sure that the schools in ED5 get the funding that they need, so that they can hire principals that are able to learn how to write grants. So that they can have the books and the materials necessary to have a conducive learning environment, so that the school buildings aren't falling apart and aren't filled with mold, right? Which is why I'm
Right.
pushing green schools.
Right.
That's my
And,
initiative.
and that there are teachers that are coming in
Yes.
and they're just, here. And if you teach in this district, maybe, you don't have to pay your student loan. But I think what you're saying about the Columbia situation, that's huge. They have taken eminent domain everywhere. And if you look at the percentage of Black and Brown people at Columbia, they're not there. Everybody in the district should be able to go to Columbia for free.
Hmm.
So these are just major issues that we're dealing with. And what your solutions are, I'm glad we're at least saying it, saying what is happening. But the question is what and how, given this situation, do we deal with, given the situation that we're dealing with, even from the federal level, and then the state level, which is what you're embarking on, and then
Hmm.
the city level,
Hmm.
with a mayor. And granted, like New York City is a melting pot, but Harlem, Black and even brown people feel we're getting passed over in
Hmm.
Central Harlem. So, these are some of the questions, but I'm going to just give the final rapid questions. Okay, this constituent says, what is your plan to address the systemic racism and discrimination that continues to disproportionately impact, and we've kind of a little redundant, but impact Black residents of Central Harlem?
Yeah, I mean, we just have to fight all of these fights on one front, right? Because this systemic racism creeps into all of these different issues, whether it's environmental issues, right? We have environmental racism that goes on,
Yes.
racism in the criminal justice system, racism in our economic system, racism in our judicial system, as we're talking about racism in our school systems, um,
Mhm.
racism in our religious institutions, in our religious systems. And so we have to be dedicated to fighting all these fights on one front. We can't just be single issue people. We have to gain the knowledge about every single one of these struggles, and we have to fight them together because that's the only way we're going to move forward. One single assembly member is not going to change things on its own. He's
Right.
going to take the community caring about and us coming together as a collective and using our collective voice to fight together. And so that's how we're going to fight systemic racism is from the root up.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. And we have the like kind of final questions. I'm just trying to make sure we're not missing anything because this is really too important a discussion. And a lot of these real conversations are just not being had. And we're looking to have the same conversations with the incumbent because these questions have to be answered. People have to hear the answers, and then they can be able to make their decision. Um, how will you ensure that the voices of the Black community are represented? And like I said, these are coming from people. So you're hearing black, 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 black and black, but that's what you're getting.
Harlem.
That's what
Yeah.
you're getting. It's all
Harlem. Yeah.
okay. How will you ensure that the voices of the Black community are represented in decision-making processes and that their needs are prioritized in your legislative agenda? Your votes on reparation and funding community organizations like a Harlem Network News, because as we mentioned, there's a media desert here. A lot of the papers are around the country and the world. Everything we had, even as people, are watching Tubi, that's owned by Murdoch. You know what I'm saying? So we're looking at all of the things that are happening, and that's how the advertising dollars are cut up, while we're watching, and then they're getting paid. So, how would you be able to engage people in decision making? And
Yeah. I mean, I kind of answered this earlier, but it's
yes,
making sure that I'm meeting people where they're at and making sure I'm bringing people into the fold. If I'm purporting to represent this district of Harlem, that means I need to be drawing in the voices of people from this district of Harlem. And so no decision I'm going to make is ever going to be in a vacuum. I'm going to make sure that, we're pulling people into the office, talking to the experts, talking to normal working class people in the community. I want to draw on people from the projects, like where I was from, because I know there are very creative people in the projects as well who know these issues deeper than other people. So I want
mhm,
to make sure we're bringing people into the fold, sitting down with people and coming up with plans together. It's called co-governance. I want to co-govern with
oh,
people from the community.
okay, yeah, because as you say, projects. I mean, everybody should be screaming from the rafters, NYCHA, 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 because
Ah, yes,
conditions in
yes,
NYCHA, it's ridiculous. It's all
horrible.
kinds of money spent. People aren't living in NYCHA for free. They pay rent,
Yes,
can get evicted.
thousands of dollars, some people.
Yeah, and yes, yeah, because they're there, they can't move anywhere else. Their
Hmm.
income is going up, so now they're paying a whole bunch of money,
Hmm.
for substandard conditions that are not safe. And a lot of the majority of the gun violence and all of that is happening there, which all goes back to the disparities, the education. But last question, which is the really, really hot and tough question. What is
Hmm.
your position on reparations? What are you seeing in terms of what's happening with reparations now?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a tough question for me because reparations is in my platform, and I think reparations is overdue. Slave owners got reparations when slaves were freed, so I hate when people tell me that reparations is impossible. It's very possible. Slave owners got it. We should get it because we're the ones that built this country. This country was built on the backs of people who look like you and me, and people watching this and people asking those questions. This city was built on the backs of people who look like you and me and the people watching this. And so our money is due. We're owed what we are due. And so I'm someone who's very deeply committed to the fight for reparations. And what we're seeing right now is, the commission report that was supposed to come out is being pushed back time and time and time again.
Right.
That is unacceptable.
Mm,
Unacceptable, especially when we're living in a time of a president who is racist and fascist and
mm,
would do anything to erase us and take away our money and power. So it's time for us to stand up for reparations. It's actually
right.
more important
Yes.
now than
Yes.
ever.
Yes,
So
because there was a hearing right at the National Urban League in Harlem a couple of
yeah.
weeks ago. And, from a media standpoint, I pushed it out there as much as I could. But once again, with the limitations of funding and everything, and, we make a way out of no way. We're making lemonade out of lemon, as Beyonce
Hmm.
said. But it was a great turnout, but people should have been standing around the corner to get in and listen to this. But like you said, it's been pushed back. There's hearings, money been spent for hearings. It's supposed to be looked
Hmm.
at in 2024, then 2026. Now it's 2029. In a state
Hmm.
legislature, would you push back on this? What would you do? How are you going
Yeah.
to deal with this?
I would 100% push back. And honestly, maybe I'd have to introduce my own reparations bills if it's going to take so long for people to keep doing studies and reports and panels and discussions. Like that is a way that people just stall us out. It's like, oh, we're going to create commission after commission, study after study. That's just done to stall us out. So if that's what they're going to do, then I'll introduce a bill myself. All right, well, we'll put a reparations bill together and we can debate it on the merits there on the floor of the assembly if y'all want to keep pushing this back. And that's what it's going to take is someone to actually stand up and fight.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And the other thing, well, it's surrounding reparations. And like you said, reparations is not new. A lot of people in Amsterdam and,
Hmm.
Holland, they got reparations and they're still getting it like a Social Security check. And,
9/11
the
victims are getting
Asians and
reparations.
Alaskans and whoever was removed from their home during World War II, they got
Hmm.
reparations. And like you said, the slaveholders, they got paid for the slaves they lost.
Hmm.
So we've got to really come to a reality in this reparations fight because it's a very critical thing and it could make a huge difference in the lives of people. So I think I'm just trying to make sure. This is Harlem Network News, and I'm here with candidate uh, Blackburn, Conrad, and we've gone through a whole gamut of questions and answers, and at least bringing awareness to what is really going on in this district. Oh, we have a Black, Puerto Rican, Asian caucus that has a convention every year. Are you familiar with that up in Albany?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
familiar.
okay. So I know that they were able to secure, and I don't know the dollar amount, a certain amount of dollars to help us, but I don't know if they have it or what has happened. Maybe we will find out tomorrow at the flag raising for Juneteenth at the state office building because a lot of them will be there. But it's all about really following the money, for once again,
Hmm.
our District 70.
Hmm.
So we'll have you give some closing remarks now, please, and whatever your appeal is. And this has been a very robust conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the conversation. My campaign's promise has only been about one thing ever, and that's to return power back to the people, right? And that sentiment comes from the heroes and leaders of Harlem's past. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Malcolm X, you know, Fred Hampton, who came through here, Marcus Garvey, Paul Robeson, A. Philip Randolph, Hubert Harrison, who gets often forgotten. They all were dedicated to this fight of building power for people here in Harlem, and that's exactly what this campaign is about. For my entire life, that's what I've been trying to do. Uh, I grew up in the projects, single parent household. We struggled a lot to get by. And that struggle formed me, right? And it formed me into somebody who wants to fight for a world where children don't have to grow up like me. That's exactly why I became a public defender. And that's exactly why I built a union in my workplace. And that's exactly why I've been writing laws for the past 3 years, including fighting every year to preserve Khalif's law and preserve our bail reform law so that we don't go back to times where New York was just throwing people away in cages and forgetting about any of their rights and due process. And so what this campaign is going to do is put tenants over landlords so that we can keep people in Harlem and stop the bleeding of 11% of Black families in the past 10 years. We're going to make sure people have more tenants' rights, and we're going to usher in cooperative ownership of our buildings here. We're going to put people over profits, where we publicize Con Ed and stop these Con Ed rate hikes, where we tax the rich. I'm the only person in this race that would sign on to all of the tax the rich bills that would bring in $44 billion annually for us. And we're going to invest that money in the community in universal health care and universal child care. We're going to tax Columbia and use that money to fund our education freely from the cradle to CUNY. And then we're going to put communities over cages. We're going to stop ICE from coming in and disappearing our brothers and sisters. And we're going to work for a criminal justice system where we transform people and have them lead healthy lives and address poverty at its roots instead of throwing people away and locking away the cages and locking them away in cages. And ultimately, what we're going to do is get money out of politics in Harlem. It gone should be the days where we take money from real estate, from landlords, from DoorDash, DraftKings, FanDuel, APAC, all of these entities that my opponent is taking money from. Those days should be gone. Money should be coming to us in Harlem. Not it should not be going out to these corporations or being used to push their agenda. And so I hope you guys join me on that journey and come out and vote. It's an important election. Vote. The polls are open until the 21st for early voting, and then election day is the 23rd. I hope you all join me in this journey, and I will be a dedicated fighter to defend Harlem.
Okay. And how can folks get in touch with you or your campaign, or
You
they
can.
have further
Yeah.
questions? Of course, you can call us at Harlem
Yeah.
Network News, but yeah.
And you can also follow us on Instagram at Conrad for Harlem. That's Conrad FOR, not the number four, FOR Harlem. And our website is conradforharlem.com. Again, Conrad FOR Harlem.com. Join our movement.
What's the campaign looking like so far in your,
Um,
how you
it's
feeling?
I'm feeling good. We were able to max out in district donations, which is good. The state matches individual donations from people who live in the district up to a certain amount. It's up to 12 times for the first $50. And we maxed out. You only get to get about $175,000 in matching. And we maxed out there, which is good. It shows that there are people in this district who are hungry for a change. So that's good. We have hundreds of volunteers who come out and help us. They're not paid volunteers. We do have some paid volunteers, but we have hundreds of unpaid volunteers, which shows that there are people who are interested in the movement that we're building. And we've knocked over 30,000 doors at this point. I've knocked many thousands of doors myself because I think it's important for me to be going door to door and showing my face to people. And so, there's a lot of momentum and energy behind this campaign. We've had big endorsements like Bernie Sanders, Working Families Party, DSA, CLSA, and a whole host of other progressive organizations. And so,
Okay. So when people vote for you, you're on two lines,
mm,
Democratic and what's the other one, working?
Working Families. Yeah.
Okay. So they can't vote for you on both.
No. So New
Okay.
York is a closed primary state. You can only vote in the primaries if you're registered for that party.
Okay.
So
Right.
Democrats
In the
can only vote for
primary.
me on the Democratic line.
Okay, okay, okay. So that's what we're doing. Okay, well, thanks so much. And
Thank
here's a
you.
here's a flash question.
All right.
What's your thoughts on the HBCUs? Because you said there's something to CUNY. So
Yeah.
where
Love
are you on that?
HBCUs. My little sister
Okay,
went to FAMU, which is an HBCU. I think more children should go to HBCUs, especially HBCU law schools. You can get a stellar education at a HBCU law school, especially if you want a school that is going to still focus on DEI, because we know the Trump administration is trying to make schools not do DEI. And so, go to an HBCU if you want an education rooted in racial justice.
okay, okay. Well, thank you. This has been a robust conversation. I'm Terry Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and we pride ourselves with speaking truth to power here, and also assuring that Harlem and Harlems of the world, that could be Ghana, are informed, engaged, and call to action, and making sure, I don't know if the media is the message or the message is the media, but we're here to bring it all. And you can reach us at 646-261-5397, Harlem Network News at gmail.com. We're revamping our website, which is harlemnetworknews.org. And also, you can donate. You can Zelle, you can Cash App. It's all under Harlem Network News, but it's very, very important. This is essential. We're essential workers in this. So thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll keep looking to see how everything goes in the campaign. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you.